Very glad to see you. We are coming closer to the end of Rap Lab, but we are also at the end of a pedagogical year of the Dr. Artium program of MDW. And boy, what was it a year. I mean, if you think that we had a pedagogical year with the pandemic, we could only see and teach and discuss in Zoom. Then there was the war in Ukraine, and we had the deepest fears for our dear student Ilya Razumejko sitting in some basement, and so it was not a funny year, I must say. And but we managed to be here together, and so in a way I just want to say I'm thankful that we can be here, that we can be together. And that with this wonderful team of technicians, teachers, students, guests, we are having a great time. So this evening and tomorrow evening we will show some of the works of our doctoral students. We have 10 students, so 5 for each, how is it called, cohort, I think, Jahrgang. And so they will show their research and their research in the arts, and also they will talk, some will talk about the arts, some will show their research in the arts or both. So we kept this a bit free. And I hope you will see how individual and how personal and how inspiring this can be. There will be an intermission after the third presentation. You are invited to go to the foyer. We will also start then in the foyer and come back to the hall after the intermission. And there will be 2 more contributions after the intermission. And we also found a secret fridge, so there are some drinks hidden in the basement. So don't run away after the last presentation, and maybe you want to share a glass or 2 with us. So very welcome. So I give the stage to Brigitta and her crew for the first presentation, Circular Composition.
Welcome to this presentation. As Johannes already said, my name is Brigitta Flick and I'm a doctoral student at MDW in the first year, so quite in the beginning. And the topic for this presentation is composition, which is a part of my research of the past month, and it's called circular composition. And it comes out of my project that for now is still called Refiguring Composition, artistically researching the contact between composition, improvisation, and the outside world. My starting point were these questions. How can it be possible to delineate a composition when it gets in touch with improvisation and the outside world? What idea, what concept of a musical composition can be gained from this? And which new artistic and other insights and consequences arise from there? And the starting point for this was actually my master thesis, where I had used the term of permeability, or actually I used the Swedish term Genomsläpplighet, or the German one, Durchlässigkeit, to not mix it up with other concepts of permeability. And I had used the idea of permeability to describe the contact of a composition of mine with improvisation. And I used the metaphor of surfaces, or I also used the Swedish word for this, where the composition, so to say, made itself permeable. So this was, for example, the notation or the different notation forms I used, or it could also be the musicians listening. Now, there are many, many problems with these research questions I presented. The first thing is, when I ask about the contact between composition and improvisation, then I actually do not discern between the action and the result, because both words are used in both ways. And the other thing is that I'm both a performer or an improviser and a composer. And of course, my practice is totally entangled. And I would say it is always entangled, because I can never, even if I would sit down with a pen and a paper, I can't deny that I'm a saxophone player, because it's in my body, and the other way around. So I'm shaped by this entanglement, and so my action is always entangled, but the outcome, to use this strange word, maybe is not necessarily entangled. So if I have composed something, we don't know about how it has come into being, or if you listen of a recording of mine or what I just did, there is no way to certainly say how it came into being. And so it's a bit, I tried to use etymology to discern between the terms, to at least try to find like a way to separate them, but obviously it turned out to be a dead end, because, or for many reasons, but one is, for example, if I say I compose, I can use the Latin origin and can say I put something together, and at least that gives me a starting point, and I can compare that, how the word is used in my, community, or in how I myself would apply it. But then if I try the Latin origin with improvisation, I can simply say that I do not foresee something, or just not foresee, but then that's another kind of knowledge, so to say, because and therefore it's hard to say from that what I actually do besides that. And of course this could be discussed more deeply, so this just as a superficial hint. So I stopped thinking about Latin origins and continue thinking about delineation, but that's equally difficult. And of course, I never thought about, how do you say, finding criteria to delineate my composition, but still, I think I had this idea of that it could be possible, like to somehow do that. And right now, I think I rather try to concentrate on. Sorry, it's a bit slow here with the press. I rather try to concentrate on in which aspects I cannot delineate a composition, because in my practice I can't, and that's why I was starting to think about all this stuff. And I think it could be useful to think again about this notion of surfaces, and this could be, for example, the ones I already mentioned, or the ones that are traditionally like used when checking if something is a musical work in the different concepts that exist. So, for example, authorship, as we will see later in the presentation. And then the other thing is that my momentary goal, because of these problems, is that I actually need to find a more appropriate way of describing my practice, or this kind of a practice, and a way that is more action-orientated, and so that I, how do you say, that can feed back into each other, so that I get more clarity about the practice, but it can also inspire my practice if I can think and talk differently about it. And my method, so to say, is to, at the moment, to explicitly entangle my improvising and composing, something which is, as I said, always entangled, but I try like to make it on purpose and to highlight it. And also by this, the idea is to, so to say, stretch my compositions and my composing, and how to say, giving this different musical and non-musical contexts and see what happens, so to say. And one outcome of this is a composition that I called Circular Composition number 2, because there was also number 1. And I have to mention it was kindly supported by Neustadt Kultur and GEMA from Germany in the framework of their COVID support for artists. And I just played the third movement of that. And it's a composition where the goal for me had been to write from my saxophone, something which I rarely do, and to take like sounds I like or movements on the instrument I like as a starting point, and then start composing from there and going back and forth between improvising with that, notating something, further improvising, and so on. And that's why I called it circular. Also, I'm aware that circular is a bit misleading because it should probably be spiralic, but I kept the term because somehow it is circular for me. And the thing is, when I came to the third movement, the approach did not work, because I had this, I had these first 5 pitches and knew that they somehow landed on the last one, on the G sharp. But the problem was I had like some vision to work that through motifically and harmonically, but I just couldn't do that on the saxophone. So what I in the end actually did was that I kind of very slowly played on the piano with like the pen in one hand and playing and going back and forth between that. So actually somehow improvising it out. And yeah, so... And I did not notate it differently to play it for me on the saxophone, so it's still, this is like still meant to be a solo saxophone piece. And the idea is also there are 2 other movements happening that work with different tone colors and multiphonics and microtonal colors of, microtonal variations of pitches. And the idea is when you come to this movement that you can like freely incorporate what has happened before and play with this. So, and what I now did is that I somehow played this, but also incorporated things that are, elements of the other movements. And I found it interesting because I thought, if I do that consciously or not, and of course, I will not dive into that discussion. But what I found interesting is that since I have worked on this solo piece, I noticed that my whole my improvising has changed, because of course when working with special techniques on the instrument it will stay, or hopefully, and then of course I can't go back to whom I was before. Then I decided to, because I felt that this movement works also without the other movements, and even without telling about the other movements and thinking about them. And so I gave this to my quartet in Berlin, and we played it a few times. And then I talked about this piece with Chanda Rule from Wien. And luckily, she decided to write lyrics to it. And so it turned out to become a new piece, and Chanda's lyrics are based on the term of kumbhaka, which I hope I tell it correctly. It's about the if you think about the breathing cycle, it's always like about inhale, exhale, and then the pause between the inhale and the exhale, which either can be like the natural pause that just happens, or a pause that you consciously can work with in yoga, for example. And so now the piece, has another layer of circularity. And now we will play it together with Chanda Rule, who will sing, and Gernot Beinreuder on drums, and Iva Roban Kritzig. I'm sorry, I did not ask how to pronounce your last name. On bass. No, it's... and we will, I will just leave this lead sheet on, or whatever it is, so that you can look at it, and we will take the same approach that I did in the beginning.
Just for a moment, between love song and beyond the waving, life-giving water. Before the push, the fight for my glory. After the tide rolls, hold me.